Hong Kong for the last generation.
On
You have a choice.
BetaMotor.com, the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations
And
with
I
that
realize
woman.
that this is something
Miss
he is
Lewinsky.
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
All right, we're back with another edition of Backfire this week without Franklin.
It's felt like been a month.
This is his last week.
Franklin, I'm sorry. I'll try to tone it down a little bit and not, kick as hard.
I think Franklin had to go take a vacation to get over all this, John. Yeah. He's out in Colorado skiing, I think, with his new bride and kids.
Well, that's nice.
It is nice. Hope he doesn't get frostbite. He's out there skiing and rooting for Bernie. Bernie. What do you think about the elections?
Well, I think it's interesting to watch Hillary's people. You had Madeleine Albright say that if you're a woman and you're not supporting Hillary, there's a special place in hell reserved for you.
Is that not the worst comment?
And then you see Gloria Steinem, the I guess, the highest peak of what you would claim the feminist movement was about. And she then says, what's amazing is if a man ascribes anything to a woman's hormones, he's a sexist.
Yeah.
But Gloria Steinem says that the reason these young girls are supporting Bernie Sanders is because they're attracted to the boys. And the only reason they're over there is because there are boys supporting Bernie, so the girls are following the boys. Now, if a man said that, he'd be labeled a sexist. But the leader of the feminist movement has now said that. And so you would have thought, well, what a better way for feminism to die than to have Gloria Steinem actually be a sexist. But it got better. Bill Clinton, who is accused of rape and sexual harassment, has now accused the Bernie Sanders people of being sexist for not supporting Hillary. That's even a better way for feminism to die.
Did you see that? Did you see her make her speech last night after she lost?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it was amazing to me. Basically, she just took time from the TV networks to do another big ad.
Pretty much.
That's about what it amounted to.
Of course, I did think it was, and she's such a bad candidate. It was kind of interesting to see her get up, and they cheered for her, which is, that's what supporters do. They cheer for you. But to go, wow, that's a great cheer. I wonder how much better it'd been if we had won. Well, guess what, Hillary? Generally, you don't call any more attention to the fact that you lost than you have to. She's a horrible candidate.
She's not very good at campaigning either, I don't think. But
I guess on the plus side, she didn't have to ask for applause.
No, that's true. And that was another pitiful thing.
Please clap.
And I'm sure that was sort of out of context, and it was sort of an odd, meant to be funny. But for a candidate to be standing up there going, and it was so pitiful.
It was. His head drops.
Bush was at a rally, and he gave a line, I guess was supposed to be an applause line, and the crowd was silent, and he kind of looked pitiful and went, please clap. And it became this YouTube. You can Google it and find it, I'm sure.
Hillary's husband, he just doesn't seem like he's very enthused about this either. He gave a little speech for her and then said something about he wished he wasn't married to her. I mean, what he said was goofy, but I mean, in his tone of his voice and stuff, you can tell he's just not on. He ain't got it.
Well, I mean, he's treading on thin ice anyway. I mean, but I will have to say it takes a lot of something to get up there and accuse someone else of being a sexist when you're probably, the sexist in chief.
It's amazing to me how Hillary's gone as long as she has and how much support she has in the Democratic Party. They've really, I think they've messed up by not having other candidates in there running against her.
Well, you don't need other candidates when you're going to cheat. By the way, the Iowa Democratic Party has now announced that they are refusing to release the raw vote totals from Iowa. Now, they released them in 2008, but they're refusing to release them now. And a lot of the Bernie's people are actually speculating that he won the raw vote. Because, see, the Republican...
he did win it probably.
The method the Republicans use in Iowa is a simple secret ballot method, and you count the votes.
Right.
They use all these formulas and coin tosses, and so it's got a lot of play in it. And so the fact that they are refusing to release the raw vote totals probably means that Sanders actually probably won the raw vote.
Which would be a 4-delegate flip, right?
Right.
And Trump.
Well, now this is just the Democrat side.
Okay. Well, Trump thinks he would have won.
Well,
too.
Trump can't deal with being a loser.
But you don't think he kind of
No,
might have
he
cheated
didn't.
him?
Look, here, I'll give you, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to say something about that. First off, I've got the information. Ted Cruz, what he said was absolutely correct. And CNN is a bunch of cover your butt whiny liberals because they're now basically skewing some of the facts to make it look like Cruz did all this stuff. But there's a more baseline thing here. What Ben Carson said was a stupid thing to say. It was one of the worst things any political person could say. When you just come out of a primary in one state, a week later there's a primary in another state, and a press guy asks you, what are you going to do next? Guess what? You say, I'm going to New Hampshire. I'm going to New Hampshire, and we're going to win in New Hampshire. That's what you say.
Right.
You don't say, I'm going to Florida to take a break. Now, my point is no one is focusing on the fact that was a really stupid thing for Sanders to say, or for Carson to say. Now, did Cruz's people see an opportunity and jump on it and exploit it? Absolutely. And guess what, folks? When Vladimir Putin says something stupid, I hope we've got a president smart enough to see the opportunity, jump on it, and seize it. I want a president smart enough to do that. So that was a completely bogus issue. And Trump was so bad there from this standpoint. His concession speech in Iowa was really good. And a lot of people like me who aren't huge supporters of his looked at it and said that was a good concession speech. It was presidential. It was, gracious and magnanimous. Then, 2 days later, the itch got him, and he just couldn't hold back, and he undid all of the good that he did with that very gracious concession speech. You
don't think he got that affected any votes or anything?
It may have, but that's the way politics works. It should. My point is, it should have. It was a stupid thing to say.
Well, he said it, but they took it out of context. Context.
Are you talking about this saying?
She just said a terrible thing. You know what she said? She said he's. That's terrible. Terrible.
Now, is that the president you want that uses that word? That's the first time a presidential candidate has ever used a word that is actually considered obscene and unutterable on public TV.
I love it.
Well, since you brought that up, let me tell you what actually happened with Ted Cruz. CNN is covering their butt right now. They keep talking about the tweets and the Twitter things. Uh-huh. And so they tweeted this, and then they're saying that the guy that tweeted it corrected it, and Cruz didn't send the correction out. But if you listen to what Cruz said, he was referring to Tapper and Bash's on-air report. He never says anything about tweets. He never said he saw a tweet. He never said that they repeated the tweet, which they didn't. What they repeated was the on-air claims by CNN's own reporters. The reporters, Tapper and Bash, actually said, and these are their words, that this was highly significant and highly unusual. And CNN did not correct that on air until much later in the night. Now, the guy did tweet out some other tweets, but Cruz never references the tweets, never used the tweets. Now, he also said that at the time this was going on, he wasn't aware of it because he was preparing to speak at a caucus. Well, guess what? CNN was televising his speech to the very caucus that he was talking about. So he had no knowledge that this was going on. And as soon as he found out, he called Carson immediately to apologize.
Now, he had a hard time explaining this at the debate the other night, didn't he?
No, this is what he explained. And then CNN came out and started talking about, that's my point. They're just like they do to Trump, they do to all of them. They're now saying, oh, look, the tweet said this, the tweet. Cruz never talked about the tweets, never used the tweets. What he was talking about was their actual on-air news reporting, which they themselves did not correct for several hours. They let their news report lay. Now, there was a tweet, but Cruz's people weren't talking about the tweet. They were talking about the on-air report, which was not corrected for hours. And as I said, they also kind of belittled him and said, oh, he knew about it. He was actually on air live on CNN's own network at the very time that he said he was.
What do you think about Trump getting 35% of the vote and Cruz came in at 11% of the vote?
I think it says a lot about Trump. He did a good job. That's a good turnout. I will say that New Hampshire, there's a lot of myths about New Hampshire. It's not particularly indicative of the rest of the country. It's not a very conservative population. But Trump has done a good job at tapping into people that are very upset at the establishment, very upset at the Washington insiders. Having said that, Cruz probably came out the best because he put almost no. Did you see the money totals there? Money totals are amazing. Bush spent, and this is just out of
Bush, unbelievable what he spent.
Bush spent something like $15 million. You come down, I think there's Rubio spent up in the double-digit millions. Cruz spent $500,000. Trump even spent, I think, $3.7 million. So of all of them, Cruz spent virtually nothing in the state, didn't devote a lot of time to the state, and came in third. That's actually a very good turnout for Cruz, and Cruz is really well positioned for South Carolina for the SEC primary. So we'll have to see. Rubio's probably the one that got hurt the most.
Yeah, Rubio, I didn't get to watch the debate the other night, but they said he had a hard time at that debate.
Well, no, he didn't, and that's another thing that's not really fair either. Christie stabbed him in the back, and I actually thought it was pretty ugly, and it appears that the people thought it was pretty ugly because while it hurt Rubio, it didn't help Christie any. But he did screw up on that issue, but then he had a really solid debate performance from there on. And, for example, his pro-life statement later in the debate, they said was one of the best you'll ever hear. His description of how he defines conservatism was excellent. But guess what? It was at 10:15. A lot of people weren't watching. They were watching the first hour when he kind of got spiked pretty hard. So he didn't have an overall bad debate performance, but he screwed that up.
What do you think is going to happen in South Carolina?
Trump's pretty strong in South Carolina. I think Cruz will run really strong in South Carolina. Question today is whether Christie even goes to South Carolina.
When are some of these guys pulling out?
Well, most of them are saying Carson needs to drop out, and they think he probably will. Fiorina is saying she's going on. She did better than she beat Carson, which was surprising. She should have been on the debate stage Saturday night. I think that was a mistake for them not to do it. But Christie is now in the same position that she was in. He's not going to qualify for the debate stage in South Carolina. So he has to, and he spent a lot of money. So he has to decide, is it worth going on or not? Gilmore ought to drop out. Carson ought to drop out.
Who is Gilmore?
Gilmore's a good guy. Gilmore is former governor of Virginia, and he's the former chairman of the Republican National Committee. But he never really got in until that last debate out in Iowa. He hadn't really shown up to anything. So he never really ran a serious campaign. He didn't get in until, I think, August anyway. He got in late. But he ought to drop. Fiorina, I'm a delegate for her. I think the world of her, but the results in New Hampshire were not great. Now, she's a hard conservative, and New Hampshire is not a hard conservative state. And so she may want to...
Where is she going to shine?
Well, I don't know. Part of the problem is, for example, the networks cutting her off that debate stage Saturday night was a real blow to her campaign. And part of what she's saying now is that the system is rigged, and it was rigged against her. And I'll have to agree with her about that. Just so people know, she came out of Iowa. She won a delegate. She beat Kasich and Christie in Iowa. She basically tied Bush. Bush got one delegate. She got one delegate. She was out polling Carson in New Hampshire, and they wouldn't let her on the debate stage. But they put Christie and Kasich on there. Now you think about that. She beat them in Iowa. She got a delegate. They didn't get a delegate. and she was out polling Carson, and all three of those guys made the debate stage and she didn't. I think that was a mistake. Newt Gingrich weighed in on her behalf. What Romney weighed in on her behalf. A lot of people who aren't necessarily supporting her, but said, look, she earned a spot on that debate stage.
What did they use as a scale?
Well, part of the problem is they had these formulas and she said this. She said, look, they have these formulas. But the formulas were put together when there were 17 people in the debate, or in the race.
Right.
And the argument was we have to have these formulas because there's 17 people and that's too many people on stage. Well, you tell me the difference between 6 people on stage and 7 people on stage. You know, that's not the same as the difference between 6 people on stage and 17 on stage.
Right.
And so I don't know why they cut her out. I think it was a mistake. I think the optics looked bad. Now, I will tell you that it's amazing to see how the liberals are treating her. They're calling her every name in the book. Now, if a conservative called a liberal woman those names, we'd be ugly, sexist bigots. But the liberals are just savaging her because she's mean. She's been mean to Hillary.
Bless her heart, she has been mean to Hillary.
Well, she's
Poor
actually been
Hillary.
one of the toughest ones on Hillary.
I know it. I like her a lot, be honest with you, but and I'm surprised she's dropped as far as she's dropped.
Well, she never, when she came into the race, she had I think something like 2% name recognition. So she's actually done very well with what she's had. But it's a big field, and I will have to say she got 4%. She beat Carson. Had she been on that stage, might have got closer to beating Christie.
Speaking of bigots and sexists and all that stuff, what's up with Christie, Bush, and Rubio saying yay to the draft for females?
Well, it's basically forcing the liberals to own the reality of what they do. See, the liberals talk a good game. You listen to Bernie. I listen to Bernie's speech, and my gosh, how does anybody listen to that and think that we can actually afford to do it? But for example, that we want to let all women into all the combat roles. Now, there are two main problems with that. The first is you can't lower the standards. We know that the standards have actually been lowered, even though they've argued they haven't. Those women that were trying to get into the special forces, they were given multiple opportunities to pass the test. No man had ever been given. You fail one of those tests, you're out. The women were given multiple opportunities. They were given special trainers. They were told what the tests were going to be beforehand so they could prepare. So we have lowered the standard. That's one problem. But the bigger problem is if you're going to say that women should be open to all combat roles, then what you're saying is we want the women to be on parity with the men. Well, if you're on parity, if you're on an equal basis with the men, then if you're going to make all the men register for the draft, you got to make all the women register for the draft. Now, I'm against it, but I'm against women being in the combat roles.
They were just showing then.
They're showing that you can't have one side of the coin without the other side of the coin. If you're going to open all of the doors for the women, then the women have to be equal in every way. And that means they have to register for the draft. Now, what the Democrats, the reason they're pitching a fit about it is because all of a sudden, all of these parents who, quite frankly, too many of our citizens don't pay attention. So when they hear we're going to make it all equal for the women can have these. A lot of these people will go, yeah, that sounds great. But then when you come back, oh, by the way, your 18-year-old daughter, she'll now have to register for the draft. They go, whoa, wait a minute, I don't like that. So that's what they're doing. They're basically saying, look, this all goes together. If you get one, you get the other.
Do you think there's really that many women that want to be in combat?
No, but that's the point of saying, fine, we got to make the draft fair. If you're going to make all the positions open, it's not fair to say the men have a legal requirement to, put themselves up if the women don't have a legal requirement to put themselves up. So I support opening the draft for women only because they have claimed that they want to have all these positions open. I actually don't support any of it. Yeah. I don't want women in combat roles. I don't want them to have to register for the draft, but you can't have part of it without all of it.
Well, it's the same thing as teaching evolution one period, and the next period teaching anti-bullying.
Right, because that is evolution is bullying. You're right.
it's just amazing to me how upside down things like that can get. I mean, it's just amazing to me.
That's actually, if you boil that down, you get a lot of the root of our problems. We have become more and more an emotional nation. So we make these decisions on an emotional level. And what Rubio and some of them are doing is they're sort of playing that game back. Because they made that emotional argument about, if a woman wants to be in special forces, it should be open to her. And people don't think it through. They go, yeah, that sounds good. Well, Rubio and them just said, fine. She also is going to have to, all women are also going to have to register for the draft. That forces people to kind of back up and look at the issue a little bit more seriously and go, well, no, wait a minute. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that they had couched it in those terms. I just seen that they were approving it.
Well, they're approving it because the Obama administration has now. The Marine Corps is still resisting. The commandant of the Marine Corps has been pretty good about this and actually gotten himself in a good bit of trouble with the Obama administration because he doesn't think that women can do what what he said was, look, we have standards and I don't want to lower any of these standards.
Well, I saw an article that talked about how the top, I'm going to goop up the numbers, but it's something like the top 10% of women in the armed forces perform at the same level as the bottom 50% of men, and how mixed combat units, they're more likely to suffer injury, death, and they're worse.
They're less
shooters.
Lethal. They're less lethal, and they're more likely to get injured or captured or dead. And I will tell you, folks, y'all need to understand, one of the reasons I don't want women in combat is because of the advantage that it gives to the enemy. Mm-hmm. The first, and I think Meg Ryan made a movie about this, but the first woman captured in the first Iraq War, she was a helicopter pilot, and they captured her and the co-pilot. And the first thing they did was tie them up, bring the woman out in front of the man, and tell him, we're going to rape her in front of you unless you tell us what you want to do. Now, you know, this all gets really uncomfortable because war is a terrible thing. But a man could sit there and watch another man get tortured and try to resist that and not give the enemy what they wanted. But men have a natural preference for feeling like they need to protect the woman, they need to protect the child, they need to protect someone not as big, not as strong as them. That's natural in all species. And so the enemy will use that against us. We'll have our women being raped in front of the men in order to get the men to tell. Now, maybe they'll learn to resist that too, but that's a hell of a price to pay for political correctness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn it back to a couple of local things here. Of course, I want to talk about these vouchers for kids' education.
Yep.
What's your opinion on the voucher system?
Well, I've always supported it. And there's a lot of rhetoric going on that's just, quite frankly, not true. And I'll tell you, I told one of the school board members this week, Dr. Ringstaff had spoken against it. And this is the same thing that I said when we were talking about the wheel tax for the schools. They put up on the school signs and the school board signs to vote for it. That's a violation of my rights as a taxpayer because I pay for those signs. I pay for all of that. And I'm okay if you're the superintendent of the schools and you want to advocate for it on your own time. That's your right as a citizen to do that. But don't advocate for it on my time, because it affects me and my tax dollars as well. So what I said was, if Dr. Ringstaff wanted to go to Nashville and testify against it, he needs to take a personal leave day. He needs to go over there on his own time and do it. He doesn't need to do it on my dime, because personally I support the vouchers. And what's funny about that is the voucher system argument has gone on for a long time. We put in a very successful voucher system in the D.C. public schools, which were the worst schools in the nation. And just for all of the good liberals out there, and quite frankly the TEA people out there, and I don't mean the teachers, I mean the activist TEA people, D.C. public schools at the time were the highest per pupil funded school in the nation, and they were right at the bottom performing. So it's not about the money, and that's what they always talk about, that it pulls money out of the public school system. But Obama and the Democrats killed that program and jerked the rug out from under many of mostly minority kids in D.C. public schools who had taken that voucher and used it to get a better education, to move out of a failing school.
You know, if you really wanted to look at a successful voucher system, New Orleans. Isn't that what happened there?
Well,
during the
in New
hurricane?
Orleans, what happens is the hurricane wiped it out, and Bobby Jindal was a new Republican governor, and he came in. He really didn't have a lot of choice, although he favored it anyway, but he put charter schools in. And the charter schools now are the majority of the schools in New Orleans. And guess what? New Orleans moved from one of the bottom performing states to way up above the middle. They're moving closer
There's a huge
to the top.
improvement.
Huge improvement in their schools down there.
So the charter schools are, tell me what a charter school is. Explain that a little bit.
It's sort of, and it gets complicated, and I would welcome anybody to correct anything I say that's wrong, because it is confusing, and I'm not fully clear on it completely, but it is chartered by the state, chartered by the local systems, but it is effectively a private school. Now, I think they do get some funding, but they have to meet certain standards and guidelines, but it basically is run outside of the control of the local district. It's sort of its own little world.
And Chattanooga's got a good number of
Yeah,
them.
they've got a pretty good number.
CSAS, all their top.
And by the way,
schools.
the education establishment is against charter schools too.
Well, let me, the voucher system, they were against, Ringstaff was against the voucher system. He was speaking out against it and so forth. What school was it they voted unanimously? They're going by the kids on the school lunch program who get a free
Well, first
deal.
off, everybody's on the school lunch program now, which I fought against.
That's what I'm trying to say. They voted for everyone to be on the school lunch
Right.
program. Now then, this voucher system is the way it works is, if kids are on a school lunch program,
Well,
it can qualify them.
Right,
for a
but I
voucher
think
system.
they do have in that it has to be that you're on there for income. In other words, you're one of the kids that would have qualified before they expanded it, and your school has to be a failing school. It really will only affect Memphis. It's targeted towards Memphis.
Right.
Now, what they're worried about is that it'll be a success, which it was a success in the D.C. public schools. And interestingly enough, Kevin Huffman, the former education secretary, his ex-wife is Michelle Rhee. Now, she's not a Republican, not a conservative, but she was the D.C. public schools director. She now lives in Nashville with her kids. She's a big advocate of this because she ran the voucher program in D.C. And by the way, just so y'all know, one of the arguments is that this is a form of going back to resegregation. That's what the liberals say. We're trying to segregate and lock all of the minority kids in public schools while all the rich white kids will move out. Well, actually, this is the opposite of that. We're trying to give the kids in the inner city schools, mostly minorities, the opportunity to get out of failing schools. But just to that point, the Friedman Foundation on Educational Choice has an entire page on its website highlighting the gold standard research that shows school choice is actually better at promoting racial integration and tolerance of social differences than zip code assigned public schools are. And even the federal government's own data doesn't back up the assertion that this causes segregation. They also found that Martin Luther King Jr. III is actually supports and attended rallies for school voucher programs. And he's made the statement, what school choice does is essentially to create options, particularly for poor and working families, that they would not necessarily normally have. And why would black voters be so overwhelmingly supportive of school choice programs? Are they racist too? So the minority people support these voucher programs. Martin Luther King III supports these. But yet the liberals and the Education Association people all claim that this is racist.
Well, I saw in Ringstaff comments that he thought everyone would be trying to open a school.
Well, they might. Good for that. That's competition. And guess what'll happen? Some of them will open up with new systems that'll be flops. And you know what we'll do? we'll make a list of all the different systems, and we'll mark those systems off the list and say those don't work. But some of them will open up under new systems that'll work better, and we'll go, you know what? That's the way to go. That's what competition's about. So Dr. Ringstaff basically was a status quo. And here's the other argument that really bothers me. They said, oh, it's going to hurt public schools because you're going to take money away. Actually, the public schools should benefit from it because it doesn't take all of the money. Let's say that the state sends $4,000 to the city school for each child that's enrolled. Under this voucher program, the person would have access to maybe, let's say, $2,500. Well, that means $1,500 continues to come to the local public school system without any child to educate. So you don't have that child to buy books for. You don't have that child to build extra classroom space for. You don't have that child to feed in the cafeteria, but you still get $1,500. So percentage-wise, it actually is a boon per pupil to the local schools.
Wouldn't have to build any more bricks and mortars, maybe.
Right, but here's the point. So if you look at that and you say, so they're going to actually, per student, get more money, why would they oppose it? Because they'll then have a competitor to compare results to. And public schools don't want to compare results.
And I'm not saying anything novel here, but when they talk about it's all about the kids, if they look at numbers elsewhere, at the voucher programs or the charter schools, look at the results. And I'm tired of people making decisions based on emotion. There are facts out there that you can drive your policies.
And part of the problem here is don't let these people say, oh, John Stanberry was criticizing teachers. I'm not. The teachers are excellent. I'll give you a good example. When my daughter was at Mayfield or Arnold School, the teachers at Arnold went on their own time to a seminar and learned a new technique on their own time because they wanted to help those kids. They implemented that technique. It worked really well. Now, the only bad thing is Dr. Denning sees how well it worked, and so the next school year, what does he do? He pulls those teachers out of the classroom, sends them over to Ross to teach the technique to the Ross teachers, and put substitutes in the Arnold School classrooms for probably, I think it was like weeks at a time. Now, the Arnold kids were the kids that really needed the help the most, and that's what those Arnold teachers were trying to do. They were trying to help those kids. And so Denning pulls the teachers out, actually harms the kids at Arnold because they've now got a substitute to teach a technique that, guess what? The system should have done it on their own. So the teachers, if you'll free them up, they want to help these kids, and they're perfectly capable of helping these kids, but they are stifled by bureaucrats and education establishment people that don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to try anything new, and quite frankly, they don't want to reward a teacher that does try harder. You know, Republicans, conservatives have pushed for years as part of these kind of reforms for paying teachers who excel. Merit pay for teachers.
Yep.
Well, guess what? The education establishment is against merit pay for teachers. Why? Because that'll force you to actually look at the teachers that are doing a good job and some of the, teachers that aren't doing so good.
All right. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Woo! You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash. The cash you need today is waiting for you at Check Into Cash. It's your money, so come in and get it.
Get a payday advance today for up to $425. At Check Into Cash, we make it quick, easy, and confidential.
The cash you need is right here, so stop worrying and stop in to Check Into Cash today.
Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or buy today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on
Pay Here USA, we pay the most because we buy the best. And we make selling your car to us as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, bring your car, truck, or SUV to one of our stores. 2, we'll give you a free appraisal with no obligation. 3, sell us your car. It's that easy. At Buy Here, Pay Here USA, we buy the best. We sell the best and we pay the most. Visit us in Cleveland, Dayton, or Chattanooga, or go to buyheresellhere.com. That's buyheresellhere.com. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
No dealers allowed.
Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933, offering the best with over 70 styles of recliners, sofas, electronic lift chairs, full living room packages. Call Mike now at 961-7239 because Jackson Catnapper now offers sales to the public
every Saturday. That's right, every Saturday.
From 8 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. Or call Mike at 961-7239. Or go see him
every Saturday
at 1911 King Edward Avenue, just across from the main plant. Jackson Catnapper, family owned and operated in Cleveland since 1933. 961-7239.
No dealers allowed. Yeah, you looking for something sweet? I know you are. Bring your little sweet self to the Village Bake Shop. Around since 1961, there ain't a baked good in the galaxy the Village Bake Shop can't whip up for you. So when you're ready to treat your mouth to a taste you won't soon forget, get over to the Village Bake Shop in the Village Green Town Center. Or give them a call at 476-5179. You dig?
Train Endurance Engineers are an elite group of extremely devoted individuals who stop at nothing to push our heating and cooling units to the brink. That way, when they pick up the pieces, they'll know exactly how to make the Train we install in your home even more reliable. Right now, their target is a Train AC unit.
Testing control. Fire up the pitching machine.
Their methods may seem unconventional,
Okay, cue the jackhammers.
but it's because of their tireless efforts that it's hard to stop a Train.
When you want an unconventionally efficient heating and air unit that keeps your home right in the comfort zone day in and day out, nothing will do but a Train. To get the best Train service, call your local Train comfort specialist. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. Keeping you comfortable is Mechanical Systems' only business, and they've been providing high-quality service and installations for more than 30 years. Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. That's 336-5739.
It's hard to stop a Train. Really hard.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back in here this morning without Franklin again. He's gone skiing on a little vacation. This is his last week, and he'll be back with us next week. We got John Stanbury. John, we got Daniel Brantley. Daniel.
John.
I got to myself. Let's talk about Friday, I think it was. There was a big article in the Banner. Lawsuit hits state marriage laws. Legal action by a local pastor and one of our, county commissioners under the marriage license. What's going on with that, John?
Well, that's a lawsuit. David Fowler, former state senator and president of the Family Action Council, brought that lawsuit, and it's being brought. He'd filed the same basic lawsuit in Middle Tennessee around Nashville a month or so ago, and this is now filed, and they'll probably file another one in the western branch of the state. They are trying to get this lawsuit filed in most of the district judicial branches, and this lawsuit is actually being filed in other states as well. And to be honest, surprisingly, the Tennessean, which is a much more liberal newspaper, actually gave a pretty honest assessment and said it's a pretty substantial lawsuit. Now, the opponents are going to say, oh, this is all about attacking gay marriage. It may ultimately be, and it is certainly by people who are opposed to gay marriage, but the points of the lawsuit are actually correct. If you read the Supreme Court's ruling, I believe, what was it, Oberfeld, which supposedly legalized gay marriage, in the language, what it did was it struck down any marriage law that limited marriage to one man, one woman. Well, if it struck down the marriage law, then the current marriage law in Tennessee, which has that restriction in it to one man, one woman, is void, which means no marriage is legal in Tennessee. And that's what David Fowler is saying, look, the Supreme Court struck this down. And at this point, the legislature is going to have to go back and pass a new marriage statute that passes constitutional muster. Now, the other problem here is in the Supreme Court ruling, they also effectively said, here's what your marriage law has to say. Well, that in fact is a violation of the constitutional responsibilities of the Supreme Court. They don't have the right or ability to tell states what they have to pass as a law. All they're supposed to do is say it either is constitutional or it's not. So they said that our law was unconstitutional, but then they went further and said, here's what you need to say. That's actually a violation of the separation of powers. And that's the other point in his lawsuit, is the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to tell us what our law has to say. They can only tell us whether our law is constitutional or unconstitutional. Now, the reason Howard Thompson's on that and the minister is on that is, and you all heard where they get into these arguments of who has standing. You have to have standing. So it either has to be someone who's been married and feels like they're, they could claim, well, my marriage is not legitimate now because the Supreme Court struck down, or it has to be somebody who performs marriages. County commissioners can perform marriages. Obviously, pastors can perform marriages. So that's why their names are on it, because they have standing.
Why would the county hire Jimmy Logan to represent them on this?
That's a completely different issue. The county gets sued all the time. And why they chose
they
to
have
hire
a county
Jimmy,
attorney. I haven't seen the county attorney do one thing.
Well, she works very, very hard, but Crystal Freiberg is an excellent attorney with incredible credentials and abilities and experience from, she worked for the city of Chattanooga. She is an excellent attorney.
All right, let's take a call. Go ahead, caller, you live. Hello?
You there, caller?
They hung up on us. They got tired of waiting.
So it goes.
Anyway, I just don't understand. It seems like every time I turn around, the county's hiring an attorney to represent them. And I know they've got a county attorney on staff. They pay a yearly salary to.
I agree. I don't know how they make those determinations. Now, I will say that this is liable. The point of this case, to be honest, is to make it back up to the Supreme Court and to force the Supreme Court basically to look at the Oberfeld decision and understand that they erred. They overstepped their boundaries in telling the states what they had to have in the law, and that they, in effect, did invalidate the marriage laws in probably, 30-plus states that had those provisions for one man, one woman. And, I don't know, I'm sure Jimmy Logan probably would relish the idea of getting a case that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. I'm sure any lawyer would.
Maybe he'll do it for nothing then.
I don't know.
Well, speaking of the scandal surrounding the big hot topics of the day, did you hear about Narel? Is that how you say it? N-A-R-A-L?
Oh, yeah.
With the Doritos commercial. Getting upset that they, quote, humanized a fetus.
That is amazing. Go ahead.
Well, folks, if y'all watched the Super Bowl, you saw the commercial where the woman is in the ultrasound and they're showing the baby, the fetus, and the man is eating Doritos, and as he moves the Dorito, the baby starts moving, trying to get to the Dorito, and he finally, I think, she gets mad at him. And don't get me wrong, I agree that he's a jerk, obviously. That was the point. He's a jerk. And he throws the Doritos away down towards the end of the room. Well, the baby delivers itself at that moment to get to the Doritos. Well, NARAL, which is the National Abortion Rights Action League, which is a pro-abortion lobby, big supporter of Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. Now, this is their actual tweet that they put out. Hashtag no, not buying it. That Doritos ad using anti-choice tactic of humanizing fetuses and sexist tropes of dads as clueless and moms as uptight. Now, don't get me wrong. First off, I don't think the mom was uptight. She was 8.5 months pregnant, and
pretty normal.
And I think that's pretty normal. The dad was a sexist jerk. But listen to that. They're opposed to the ad because it humanized fetuses.
Just like every ultrasound does.
That doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, I mean,
it does humanize fetuses.
Well, but here's the point. They don't want it to be, they don't want anybody to think of it as human. Because if you think of it as human, it forces you to think about abortion as ending a human life. And so they are so radical, which Hillary Clinton is right in step with them. Hillary's position is you should be able to abort a fetus up until the moment of delivery. Now, keep in mind, folks, when you think about that, the moment of delivery, we can now deliver a premature baby at 25 weeks and still have that baby survive. So at 25 weeks, that baby is survivable as a human being. And Hillary and NARAL want to be able to abort that baby up to the point of delivery. How far are we away from killing the baby 2 days later or 3 days later, infanticide? Because the only difference between right before delivery and right after delivery is where the baby's at. Right before it's in the womb, right after it's out of the womb. So if you can kill that baby a minute or two before delivery, what's the effective difference in killing that baby after delivery? And by the way, before you say I'm crazy, there's a Dr. Singer who is one of Harvard's medical ethics professors who says he supports abortion up to post-delivery 2 years.
Yeah.
That means he supports infanticide, killing a baby up to 2 years, because he says up to 2 years they're not able to take care of themselves, so they're not technically a human. That's Harvard's bioethicist.
Well, you know why he did that. He's one of the few that is consistent and, like you talked about earlier, following it to its logical conclusion.
So it's logical conclusion.
Yep.
Let's take a call. All right, caller, go ahead.
All right, John.
Yep.
I got a question for you.
All right.
Deal with ring staff and our educational personnel down here in Hamilton County.
You turn your radio down a little, sir. We got a little feedback.
Yeah. I just, there was so much controversy on this deal that happened down in Ooltewah High School with the basketball team and all this other stuff. It wasn't anything, but everybody here is after Rick Smith's head. And I just wonder if there's anything, any criminal procedure that's going to go on with a breach of contract for ring staff out of the Bradley County system. What have you heard about that?
Well, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how that works exactly. I don't think there would be breach of contract from the standpoint of they fired him. And I will have to say I was surprised that they fired him. I wish the vote had been unanimous to fire him, but they did fire him. Now the question now is whether he's going to bring a lawsuit to try and, because you talk about having a lot of gall. After what transpired, he then said that he wanted to resign and he wanted 18 months of pay, which amounted to, I think, $220-something thousand. He wanted his insurance and benefits and retirement to continue during that time. A lot of gall, and I give it to them to have gone ahead and terminated his contract. So I don't know that there's anything criminal there. Now, there's a lot of speculation about who the other party to this affair was, and it's not that any, at least on my part, I don't care. It's not my business from a personal standpoint, but it does matter as to whether she was an employee of the system or not, because that's a further breach of his contract, and hopefully it's a breach of their standards. I will say for a while there was some problem in the county schools with whether they had that actually in their system as to whether it was inappropriate for employees and school board members or things like that to be in personal relationships.
Is there anybody in Bradley County that any attorney, I should say, in Bradley County that would represent him on this case? I mean, he would have to get a attorney.
He's got an attorney. And the only reason I say that is I remember reading that in one of the stories, and I did not recognize the name. I don't believe he's from here. And now it's up to Ringstaff as to whether he crawls away in a hole like decent people used to do when they screwed up like this, or whether he actually sues the city for more money. And let me say one thing. Dawn Robinson is the chairman of the city school board, and I just want to say, she has dedicated years of her life to the schools and the kids and the faculty and the taxpayers, and this has been a really tough time. She's had a real personally tough time last week, and it was horrible timing when this all came out, and she did a very, very good job, and I would just ask everybody to please keep her and Dr. Robinson in your all's prayers. She needs it, and she's been a good public servant, and we should support her with our prayers.
Well, John, that's something that should have never happened. Even down here in Hamilton County, that should have never gone on because of the lack of supervision. And I honestly think that Rick Smith I think he's guilty for not, paying more attention to the affairs of the sport department down here in Ooltewah High School, because we've had a good football team, basketball team, and everything, and somebody needs to look after that.
I agree, David, but there's another thing to keep in mind here. We bear a pretty good brunt of this blame as well. When we built Walker Valley High School, the football stadium was finished before the chemistry lab or the cafeteria was. As a public, we place an inordinate amount of care and concern with our athletic programs. And for example, and this is 10 years old, 10 or 12 years ago, we had, I think, 72 coaches on the county school system payroll. Now, the problem with that is, I asked the superintendent at the time, Dr. Taylor, I said, how many of these kids do you think will ever go on to earn a living as a professional athlete? And there's just sort of dead silence.
Now, I have to argue with you a little bit.
Well, my point is
I
not
don't think
that
they're going to go on to earn a living as a professional athlete, but I think they'll go on and know how to work hard to make a living.
I don't disagree that my point is not that there's not value there. My point is it's all about perspective and balance. And how many chemistry teachers were there? How many math teachers were there? So my point is you got 72 full-time salaried people doing sports, and yet we continuously cut our science programs, we cut our math programs. We're teaching them how to
I'll have to argue with you a little bit about that. If it hadn't been for sports, I'd have probably been over in Bradley County Jail right now, to be honest.
Well, that's where I picked you up this morning, Steve.
I was going through some hard times. I had a dad I lost about that time. I was having some hard time, and I think sports help save me.
I agree, but my point is you have to be balanced on these things. And we as a culture put a lot of for example, we pitch a fit over how much a doctor makes. Does anybody care how much Kobe Bryant makes? So a doctor can cut you open, lift your heart out of your chest, put someone else's heart back in, hook it all back up and get it working and save your life. And we're going to be bitchy about how much money that doctor makes, but we're okay with Madonna making $45 million a year or Kobe Bryant making, $30 million a year. There's a perspective problem here is all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not important. And my son's playing college football, so obviously it's important to me. But you have to have some perspective on some of these things. And David, I think the down there in Ooltewah, and some of it is demographics. They don't enforce their zoning in Hamilton County. So what you had was Ooltewah has a pretty rough population. Whereas East Hamilton, when they built that new school, all the people that could transferred out of Ooltewah and transferred over to East Hamilton, and the school system allowed that. And so you end up with a culture at Ooltewah that was pretty tough and pretty rough.
Well, John, I graduated from Ooltewah High School, and I'm not rough.
What year was that?
That was David, I had someone point this out to me. It was kind of a funny way to put it. He said, let me just put it this way. What sports does East Hamilton really excel at? Do you know?
Yeah.
Boys and girls soccer. What does that tell you? It tells you that the middle-class people who play soccer ended up going over to East Hamilton, whereas the kids, and quite frankly, the kids at Ooltewah, a lot of them are trying to escape from even worse schools in Chattanooga. And football's important to them, and they've always had a good program. But my point is, the school system has allowed those schools. They have, and we did it here with have and have not schools, and they ought to try to make these schools more equal.
I'll make one last little comment here. I just think, that it's really, really devastating to the Bradley County children and to the Ooltewah children, regardless of what they do to their peers. And, it's something that it's a topic of conversation.
Well, here's the thing, too, David. Think about this. When we were in school, that kind of stuff, I mean, what kind of culture have we created where that's something that you do?
Yeah.
I mean, we might have, you might have stolen someone's clothes out of the locker room. You might have thrown cold water on them in the shower. But to take a broom handle?
Oh, Lord.
My gosh, what kind of culture have we allowed to be developed in our country?
Yeah, it's pathetic and pitiful.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for calling.
All right, thanks.
Well, let's go. Let me bring out one more thing here. Another thing. Less jail time could slow the spread of the HIV. A study's been done.
You can do a study on
jails, in prisons. They have done a study, and they say that reducing the number of men who go to prison could help curb HIV and other sexually transmitted disease infection control. Unbelievable that they even do a study for this.
Well, basically, if you listen to Bernie Sanders, you listen to the liberals, we don't want to lock people up anymore. Now, are we locking some people up we probably shouldn't? And do we need to look at our drug program and see about rehabilitation for some of these people? Probably. But this is a movement to basically undo the law and order that we pushed through in the 80s and 90s, which actually has resulted in a reduction in crime, reduction in the murder rate, except in the cities controlled by the same liberals who are pushing this kind of claptrap. Now, at the same time, I don't know if you saw this, New York City, and they're following a program that I think has already been done out in California. They're going to pay people not to commit crime. They've identified people.
Who thinks of this stuff?
They've identified people who, now these are already criminals, but they're people that they think will continue to commit crimes, and they're going to pay them. In New York, it's close to $1,000 a month.
No
so you're
way.
talking about $12,000 a year. So you're a criminal.
What kind of crime would I have to commit to get on this
Well,
list?
no, what kind of crime do I not commit?
No, but you've got to get on the list first.
No,
right?
but yeah, I know, but that's my point. It's like the farmer who writes the government, says, I'm thinking about going into the not raising hog business.
We're going to pay you top dollar.
How much will you pay me not? And my hogs that I won't be raising will not be eating so much corn. But that's what they're going to do. So the guy goes, hey, I was thinking about being a murderer. Will that get me $1,000 a month or $1,500 a month if I agree not to be a murderer?
Wow.
So you've got liberals now wanting to pay people not to commit crimes.
That's
well,
awesome.
now we've got in the UK, we've got doctors that have started a strike.
Well, if you listen to Bernie Sanders last night, he wants single-payer, national, socialized medicine. That's what you got. That's Great Britain. That's socialized medicine, and that you got doctors going on strike. And I don't think a doctor ought to go on strike. But by the same token, what they're saying is the government cut their pay, cut their overtime, but expects them to continue to work overtime.
Yep.
And quite frankly, who wants to go through what it takes to become a doctor and then not get paid anything for life and death decisions that you could also be sued over?
Mm-hmm.
They've got, it says here, 3,000 operations were canceled because of a strike, a walkout, and so forth.
Well, are you feeling the burn, people? That's what you got to look forward to.
The doctors over there, their pay grade, the way they're paying them over there, I mean, at the highest level, it's just a little over $100,000 for a doctor. And most of the doctors are starting in there about 30-something thousand.
Well, just so people understand, if you go through medical school and you get any kind of specialty, you're in your mid to late 30s before you get out,
and you're in your mid to late 60s before you pay it off.
So that
ain't cheap.
Who's going to do that?
Well, that's why we had for years doctors from Canada in particular would come to America to practice, and patients would come to America because they got the best care. But that
what they don't understand is he keeps talking, like Bernie talked about, universal coverage. Well, you'll have universal coverage. It won't be the same coverage you've got now. And again, we talked about this earlier. People listen to something, they make an emotional decision, they don't think it through. You will not have the same type of medical care that, the pharmaceutical companies, and there are plenty of examples where they have screwed people. I don't disagree. But the pipeline for new drugs has already seen a 40 and 50% decrease in the number of new drugs coming through the pipeline. Mm-hmm. When you start reining in their ability to recoup their losses, because the vast majority of new drugs don't make it to the marketplace, they fail. And the other thing is, the reason a lot of these drugs are cheaper in other countries is because it's much cheaper to get a drug on the market in these other countries. We have a Food and Drug Administration. We have a bureaucratic system in America that costs billions of dollars to bring a drug to the market. So one of the reasons drugs are cheaper in other countries is not because the pharmaceutical companies suck, but it's because our government over-regulates the industry.
All right. Early voting starts today, am I right?
I believe so.
So be sure to go vote.
And if you're not registered, you've missed it. It closed last week.
But anyway, be sure to vote. Typically these type of elections have a very low turnout. Make us proud. Be an American citizen. Go vote. Do it today.
Tell them Backfire sent you.
Backfire sent you. Bye-bye. See you next week, and Franklin will be here.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.